In the new HBO documentary Fukushima, A Nuclear Nightmare, it documents Japan's struggle as it faced a nuclear catastrophe while still reeling from the devastation of an earthquake and a tsunami. Fukushima, A Nuclear Nightmare is directed by James Jones and Megumi Inman, and James Jones has previously directed films such as Chernobyl, The Lost Tapes, and Megumi Inman has previously directed films such as Predator, The Secret Scandal of J-Pop. And Fukushima, A Nuclear Nightmare was released in UK cinemas February 20 and will be screening in the US on HBO starting March 10. Fukushima, A Nuclear Nightmare is a very entertaining, tension-filled documentary. It really does play like a thriller, like the musical score throughout the whole film, and just the way it plays out, the way it's edited, and it plays to the real-life events, and of course those real-life events which chronicled the 2011 meltdown in a nuclear reactor in Fukushima. It really does play like a thriller, and I do highly recommend checking out this film, Fukushima, A Nuclear Nightmare. In the first half an hour of the film, we get kind of a history lesson of nuclear being introduced to Japan as a safe option for power, and we even get like archival, like promotional propaganda from the company Tecmo in Japan who built the nuclear plant, and then once we get footage of the earthquake, the highest ever level earthquake in Japan, and then the tsunami that followed that, all the harrowing footage of that, of the water increasing, and then the final hour of the film chronicles the nightmare that began in Fukushima when the water level rising from the tsunami like the safety measures in Fukushima nuclear power plant were just not enough to combat this tsunami and earthquake that was preceded it. In this film, we get a whole range of interviews from people who were caught up in the earthquake, like school teachers and students, and people and mayors who lived near the surrounding areas of Fukushima. But the main interviews on this film are the people who worked in the nuclear power plant. We also get an interview with someone who either still works for Tecmo or used to work for Tecmo. Like his interview kind of sounds off like someone who's a bit defensive of Tecmo's role in the disaster. So maybe he still works there, but the film mainly focuses on interviews and archival footage from kind of like reenactments from inside the Fukushima power plant, and not just Japanese people, but also Americans and international people who worked for Tecmo. And as I said before, it really does play like a real life thriller, because it plays off day by day. Like it on the screen will say day 1 of the disaster, day 2, day 3, day 4, and each day as it goes past, because it becomes important before like urgent and very tension filled. And we get new news clippings from all around the world explaining what's happening in the nuclear plant, and these news snippets and also interviews with the people who were in the plant were very important, because the Japanese government at the time, who was a very new government at the time, like very fresh, and didn't really seem to know what they were doing. The reason why these news clippings and interviews with people from the plant are important is because the government at the time were not given a lot of information as to what was going on, and still to now, it's been 15 years since that time, and the government hasn't really been forthcoming in what almost caused a catastrophe, and what's been done to prevent this happening again. So these news clippings really did give like a kind of a layman's like the graphics on the screen and the explanation as to what's happening day by day at Fukushima were very important to us as a viewer, because they really do give it insight, and really do give insight into what really was happening. And it really does show that the people inside this plant, there were 69 people who stayed back, Japanese people who stayed back to try and prevent a catastrophe in Japan. Like this would have wiped out at least half of Japan, if not the whole country, if these nuclear reactors leaked leaked the hydrogen fuel, whatever it is, that into the country, because it would have been a disaster. Even though at this present time the surrounding areas of Fukushima are inhabitable, and will take decades and decades, maybe half a century, just to clear all the radiation and debris from this disaster. And it really shows these Japanese people who stay behind, these workers who stay behind, really are heroes, because they had to basically volunteer to be suicide workers, because they had to admit that they're okay, we're not going to survive this. And especially in the early stages where there was just no solution in sight, like there was no choice but to impede disaster, because we have no solution as to what's going on. And what they really needed was, they needed water. They really needed to cool down these nuclear reactors. That was their main goal. And the water was evaporated from these nuclear reactors. And I think there was 6 nuclear reactors in Fukushima. So they really needed to find a solution. And really the solution ended up being, in the final days, because they did have like 2 fire engines pouring water into the nuclear reactors, and that seemed to be helping. So they eventually, towards the end of the film, very brave nuclear firemen drove from Tokyo to Fukushima with a whole army of fire trucks, and that was basically the solution to this disaster. We do get interviews, as I said before, we get a lot of interviews with people who worked in the Fukushima plant, and it's really the psyche and psychological impact that it had on them. They really had to do like a suicide mission, and they all have families and children outside the plant, and it's just how they deal with every situation, how they was like tried to keep light of the situation, take photos and stuff. So it really does show the emotional toll. Even though in Japan these Tekmo workers came across as evil, the film does a great job of, hopefully inside Japan they can see this documentary and show that, yeah, they work for this now evil company Tekmo, but these workers were just doing their job, and they really did a fantastic job. I give Fukushima a nuclear nightmare 4 stars out of 5. If you've already seen documentaries on this topic, I'm not sure how much you get out of this film, but for me, I have seen footage of the tsunami and earthquake and disaster that happened after that, but I haven't really seen a documentary about that goes into depth of what really happened at Fukushima. So I definitely recommend checking out this film if you like me, you don't know a lot about what happened in 2011 at that disaster. And this film really plays out like a real life thriller. Just the way it's presented and edited, and the musical score and the interviews with everybody involved really does combine to make a really thrilling, high stakes thriller. So I definitely recommend checking out this film, Fukushima: A Nuclear Nightmare. Thanks for watching. What did you think of Fukushima: A Nuclear Nightmare? Please comment below what you thought of the film. See you next time. Bye.